The security guard at the gate of Mensa Bright and Associates on Liberation Road in Accra was 22 years old, and he had been doing this job for 11 months. And in 11 months, he had never once had to say what he said that morning. "Madam, you cannot submit that." The woman standing at the gate had walked 4.5 kilometers from the Dansoman Junction in the rain. Not the gray drizzle that passes in October, but the real Accra rain, the kind that comes in slanted, the kind that turns the gutters on Liberation Road into channels of dark water moving fast, the kind that sounds like someone is throwing coins against a zinc roof from very close. She had left her house at 6:44 a.m. because she could not afford the trotro and the advert had said 9 a.m. But she needed to be first. She was not first. There were 11 people ahead of her, all of them dry, all of them with printed papers in clear plastic folders. What she was holding was a notebook page. Both sides covered in blue ink, her handwriting very small and very careful, the lines ruled with a pencil and then erased. The paper had gotten wet at one corner from where her bag strap had let the rain through. She had pressed it flat against her chest for the last 2 kilometers. The guard said it again. "Madame, the application must be typed and printed. It is on the notice." She looked at him. She did not argue. She folded the paper the way her grandmother had taught her to fold anything worth keeping. Once down center, once across, pressed between both palms, and she put it back in her bag. "Please tell me where I can find a printing shop near here," she said. The guard looked past her shoulder at the 11 people waiting. He told her there was one on the lane behind the fuel station 2 streets back. He told her it opened at 8. It was 7:19 a.m. She thanked him and turned around and walked back into the rain. Her name was Adaora Nwosu. She was 47 years old, and she weighed 54 kilograms because she had been eating once a day for 8 months, not from illness but from arithmetic. She had done the numbers in a notebook the same way she did everything, very carefully, and once a day was what the numbers said. She was 5 feet 4 inches. Her clothes that morning were a pressed white blouse she had bought secondhand from the Contamanto market for 8 setas, and a dark blue skirt that had once belonged to a woman whose house she cleaned, a woman who had packed it into a bag for donation without knowing the skirt still had a receipt in the pocket from a boutique on Osu Oxford Street. 40 setas 3 years ago. Adaora had found the receipt and kept it in her bag alongside the notebook, not out of bitterness. She kept it because it reminded her that value and price were different things, and she had learned not to confuse them. The object she carried everywhere was a brown leather purse, no bigger than a man's hand, with a brass clasp that no longer closed all the way. Her mother had bought it from a market in Kumasi in 1991. The leather had darkened with age, and there was a crack along one side that Adaora had stitched herself with dental floss, the white thread still visible. Inside the purse were 3 things: a folded photograph, the notebook receipt from the boutique, and exactly 14 setas and 50 pesewas. She had counted it that morning before leaving the house, sitting at the kitchen table by the window where the light was good. What she wanted from this job was not complicated. The position was administrative assistant at a mid-sized trading company. The pay was 1,400 setas a month. With 400 setas, she could send her daughter Ya back to school in January. Ya was 14, and she had been out of school since March when Adaora lost her position at the logistics company on Tema Motorway, cut after 9 years of service, along with 17 others, in a restructuring that the HR manager had explained with a PowerPoint presentation and a laminated sheet about severance calculations. Adaora had taken the laminated sheet home and kept it in the notebook. She understood systems. She had always understood systems. This was her skill, not a dramatic one, not the kind that showed up at a glance. But she could look at a set of numbers or a sequence of tasks and see immediately where the gap was, where the error was, where someone had counted something twice or forgotten to count it at all. She had saved her previous employer 312 cetas over 9 years by catching billing errors in freight invoices before they went out. She had the records. She had printed them on the morning she was told to clear her desk, and they were in the notebook, too. At the printing shop behind the fuel station, she waited 16 minutes for the owner to open the shutters. The shop smelled of toner and something like burnt rubber. The man behind the counter was young and did not look up immediately. She explained what she needed. He typed while she stood at the counter and told him what to write, and when she saw the first version on the screen, she pointed to 2 spelling errors and a formatting inconsistency in the dates column. He corrected them without comment. The printing cost 3 cedis. She had 11 cedis and 50 piece was left. She was back at the gate on Liberation Road at 8:47 a.m. The guard let her through without a word. The reception area of Mensa Bright and Associates had pale marble floors and fluorescent lighting and a row of plastic chairs bolted together along one wall. There was a large photograph on the wall behind the receptionist's desk, a man in his 60s in a dark suit shaking hands with someone from the government. A small plaque beneath it read, Quadwo Mensa Bright, founder and chairman. The receptionist's name tag said Blessing. Blessing was 26, and she wore her hair in a tight bun and her nails were painted coral. She did not look up when Adora approached the desk. She was looking at her phone screen. Application submission, Adora said. Blessing took the papers without looking and placed them on a pile that had at least 30 pages in it already. ID? Adora placed her national ID on the desk. Blessing photographed it with her phone, still not looking up, and slid it back. You'll hear from us if you're shortlisted, Blessing said. Thank you, Adora said. She stood there for one moment more, not because she expected anything else, but because she was reading the job description pinned to the notice board behind Blessing's head. The full, not the excerpt from the newspaper. She read it in approximately 8 seconds. Then she turned and walked back through the glass doors. Blessing reached for the next applicant's papers. She glanced once at the pile. Somewhere near the middle, not quite visible, was the still damp edge of a printed CV that had started as a handwritten notebook page that morning. There is a woman who sits at the entrance to the parking area, at the base of the building on Liberation Road, every weekday from 7 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. Her name is Constance. She is 71 years old and she sells chin-chin in small cellophane packets from a wooden tray she balances on a stool in front of her. She has been sitting at that spot for 11 years. She was there when the original ground floor tenants moved out and when Mensa Bright moved in. She knows who parks where, who arrives late on Mondays, which department heads lunch together, and which secretary has been crying on which Tuesday. She does not offer this information, but she holds it. Adora stopped at her tray on the way out and bought 1 packet of chin-chin for 2 cedis. She had 9 cedis and 50 piece was left. She stood eating while the rain came down again, lighter now, and watched the cars on Liberation Road splash through the puddle at the corner near the gate. You came from far, Constance said. It was not a question, Adora said. Constance looked at her for a moment, the way very old women look at people they are deciding whether to speak truly to. How many jobs have you applied for this week? She said. 14, Adora said. Constance made a sound with her teeth, low and long. Abi. She reached under her tray and produced a cup of ginger tea in a small plastic container, the kind that seals tight. Take this. You walked in the rain. Adora looked at the tea. She pressed it with both hands and felt the warmth move from her palms up through her wrists. Thank you, she said. Her voice did not change, but she held the cup for a long time before she opened it. She walked back to the Trotro stop and waited in the remaining drizzle for a bus that was not too full. She spent 2 cedis on the fare. She had 7 cedis and 50 piece was left. She sat by the window and opened her notebook and wrote down the address of the company, the name Blessing, the name of the HR contact from the notice board behind Blessing's desk, Kobina Osei, and a note that the full job description on the notice board mentioned proficiency in pastel accounting software, which the newspaper advert had not mentioned. She underlined it. She had taught herself pastel from a pirated DVD in 2017 while her daughter slept. She had not put it on the CV because she had not seen it in the advert. She wrote, follow up if no response by Friday, reference pastel qualification. She closed the notebook and looked out the window at the city passing. She had not eaten yet that day. By Thursday evening, she had not heard from 12 of the 14 companies. She had heard from one, a rejection by text message, auto-generated. The 14th was Mensa Bright. She sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open and looked at the Friday note she had written on the Trotro. She had 4 cedis and 30 piece was left. Ya was in the back room doing homework by phone torch because they were on credit off again with the electricity. If this story is hitting you the way I think it is, the arithmetic of it, the exact amounts, the number of days, stay with me, because what happens next is something that begins with a decision Adora made at 8:14 p.m. on a Thursday night that she was not sure she had the right to make. She wrote the email in her notebook first longhand, the way she wrote everything important. Then she borrowed Ya's phone and typed it. The email was addressed to Mr. Kobina Ose, HR manager, at the address she had found in the notice board description. It was 94 words. It introduced her by name and application date, noted that she had not included her Pastella accounting certification in the submitted materials, as the original advert had not listed it as a requirement, and asked whether she might submit a supplementary note. She did not apologize for writing. She did not use the word unfortunately. She closed by thanking him for his time. She pressed send at 8:22 p.m. and put the phone down on the table and went to the back room and sat with Ya until the homework was done. Kobina Ose was 38 years old, and he had been HR manager at Mensa Bright for 3 years. He was the kind of man who answered emails at night not because he was anxious, but because he was genuinely interested in people, which was a rarer quality in HR than most people assumed. He received Adora's email at 8:22 p.m., and he read it twice. The first time he was looking for irregularities. The second time he was looking for something else, and he found it, the tone of a person who did not beg, who explained, who had done the work and had the right to say so. He had a particular memory that the email disturbed without meaning to. 2 years ago, he had received an application for an accounts role from a woman who had handwritten the cover letter because she said she had no printer access, and his predecessor, a woman named Gifty, had separated that application out of the pile into a box she kept under her desk labeled, without irony, incomplete. The woman had never been called. 3 months later, the pastel expert they had hired from a prominent firm had made a 47 Silsetti error in a reconciliation file that took weeks to untangle. Kobina had never opened the incomplete box. He had always meant to. He typed a reply at 8:47 p.m. It said, "Dear Ms. Nwosu, please send the supplementary note and any relevant certifications at your convenience. K." Ose Adora was asleep when the email came. Ya saw the notification at 10:51 p.m. when she picked up the phone for something else, and she sat very still for a moment before she went to her mother's room and woke her. What happened the following Tuesday morning at Mensa Bright and Associates is something the people who were in that building still remember, not because it was dramatic, but because of the sequence of it, the way one small decision makes a door, and the way a door is either walked through or not. Adora arrived at 8:55 a.m. for a 9 a.m. interview. She had borrowed a press jacket from a woman in her building named Mrs. Asante, dark gray, one button missing from the sleeve that Mrs. Asante had not noticed, and Adora had replaced the night before with a button from her sewing kit that was close but not identical, a slightly darker gray. She had the notebook. She had the photograph in the leather purse. She had 3 setas and 80 piswas. Blessing was at the desk. Blessing recognized her from the week before or didn't. It didn't matter. She pointed to the chairs. Adora sat. She did not look at her phone. She did not rehearse. She opened the notebook to the page where she had written the Mensa Bright job description from memory and the 2 notes had made after reviewing the company's public financial filings on the library computer the previous Saturday. The notes were specific, a discrepancy between the Q2 2023 and Q3 2023 debtor days figures in the annual report that suggested either a collections lag or a reconciliation error in the period. She had written 2 possible explanations. She had not intended to use the notes unless asked. She had written them because writing was how she understood things, and understanding things was how she prepared for rooms she had not yet entered. At 9:04 a.m. a door opened and a man came out. He was not Kobina Ose. He was older, mid-60s, gray at the temples. The kind of man who moved through a room the way water moves through a familiar course. He was wearing a suit the color of charcoal and shoes that had been polished that morning, the kind of shine that takes time. He looked at the row of chairs. There was one other person waiting, a young man with a laptop bag who had been on his phone since 8:48. The man in the suit looked at Adora. He looked at the notebook on her lap. "Miss Nwosu," he said. Kobina Ose was 38, and he was standing behind this man, and Adora could see from the way he stood that the man in front of him was not someone you proceeded through a door. "Yes," she said. The older man said, "Come in." The office was a corner room with windows on 2 sides. The older man sat across from her, and Kobina Ose sat to one side. On the desk between them was a printed copy of her CV, and beside it, a separate sheet of paper, a printout of her email from Thursday night. The older man looked at the email printout, and then at her. "Kobina tells me you spotted a qualification gap in our own job posting," he said. The newspaper advert omitted the pastel requirement that was on the full description on your notice board, she said. I saw the full description when I came in the previous week. You came in the previous week to submit, yes. And then you came back after reading the notice board. I read it while I was in reception, she said. I didn't come back specifically. I noticed it before I left. The older man was quiet for a moment. He turned the email printout face down. You worked at Translog for 9 years, he said. Yes. And you were part of the 2023 restructuring. Yes. What did you do in your last 18 months there? She told him. She told him about the invoice audit system she had built in a series of spreadsheets over 4 years, cross-referencing freight billing codes against confirmed dispatch manifests, catching duplicate charges and miscoded line items. She told him the 312,000 figure. She told him she had the records. He did not ask to see them. He looked at Kobina Ose once, briefly. Then he looked at the notebook. May I, he said. She handed it to him. He opened it to a random page, the page with the Mensa Bright notes. As it happened, he read it for approximately 40 seconds. The room was very quiet. Somewhere in the building a printer was running. Through the window, the noise of Liberation Road came in faintly. The buses and the rain smells still in the air from earlier. He closed the notebook and handed it back. I'm Quadwo Mensabright, he said. I founded this company in 1997. I came out to speak with you personally because of an email my HR manager forwarded to me last Friday. He forwarded it because he recognized something in how it was written. He paused. He was right. The silence lasted perhaps 4 seconds. Adora pressed the leather purse in her lap once, the way she always did when she needed to be still. The brass clasp that didn't close all the way. The position we advertised, Mensabright said, pays 1,400 setas a month. He looked at the notebook on the desk between them. That is not the position I'm offering you. The contract Adaora and Wosu, signed on the 14th of November, was for a senior accounts verification role at 3,200 setas a month. The employment letter was given to her in a white envelope with the company logo embossed in the corner. She took the trotro home. She sat by the window the same way she had sat on the way back 3 weeks before, and she opened her notebook to a new page and wrote down the figure and the date and Ya's school registration deadline, January 8th, and the number of weeks between now and then. Then she looked out the window. She did not cry on the bus. She held the envelope and the notebook in her lap. She pressed the leather purse. Outside the bus, a craw moved the way a craw always moves, quickly, loudly, without announcement, with the smell of road food and exhaust. And somewhere far back, the smell of rain on hot concrete that this city makes better than anywhere. She got off at Danceman and walked the 8 minutes to her street. She stopped at the small provision shop at the corner and bought a piece of fried yam for Ya, 3 setas, and paid for it with the last of her money. She had 80 pesos left. She held the envelope in the same hand as the yam and walked home in the last light. When she got to the door, she stood on the step for a moment, not collecting herself. She was already collected. She was just standing in the last quiet moment before a thing changes. She knocked twice, which was the signal she had always used with Ya. 2 knocks meant I'm home and it's good. 3 meant I'm home and we need to talk. She heard Ya's feet on the floor from inside, coming fast. Quadwo Mensabright had built his company over 27 years by one principle he had stopped, naming out loud because people treated it as a slogan when he said it but a law when he practiced it. What you measure, you find. He had measured things other people did not bother to measure. He had found things other people missed. When he was 34, he had caught a fraud in his own partner's accounts that would have cost him everything because he kept records in a notebook, not a system, not a database, a notebook. And he reviewed them every Friday, and one Friday a column did not add up the way it should have. He was 64 now, and he still kept a notebook. He recognized Adaoras the way you recognize something you have seen in a mirror a long time. He had Kobina send the remaining applicants a polite rejection letter that Friday. Blessing was tasked with updating the job advert template to include all software requirements. It was a small correction, but it had a company-wide memo attached to it, signed by Mensabright himself, that said, when we create incomplete information, we select for incomplete applications. Every gap in our process is a door we closed ourselves. He did not name Adora in the memo, but the woman at the printing shop on the lane behind the fuel station, who had been watching when the memo was forwarded to her building's managing agent as a tenant circular, told Constance about it on a Wednesday morning over Chin Chin. Constance received the information with the stillness of someone who had been watching a long story right at a chapter they expected. She was there on the morning of Adara's first day. She watched her walk through the gate in Mrs. Asante's gray jacket, the button now fully matching, it seemed, or perhaps Constance couldn't see well enough to tell, and she said nothing. When Adora passed, she gave her a nod the way very old women nod when they have watched something long enough to know it was always going to land where it did. Adora nodded back. She walked through the gate of Mensa Bright and Associates at 8:41 a.m. on the 25th of November, and she did not look back at the street. Quadwo Mensa Bright believed he had done a smart thing. He had found a capable person in an unconventional way. That was his version. But the truth, the version that Constance understood from her stool at the parking entrance, that Kobina Ose understood from the email he had forwarded upstairs at 10:14 p.m. on a Friday when most men his age had stopped reading their phones, is that Adora Nwosu had never needed saving. What she needed was the absence of the barrier. She did not need someone to carry her through a door. She needed someone to stop standing in front of it. The system that morning on Liberation Road was not cruel in the way that makes the news. There was no shouting. There was no blood. There was a guard telling a woman in wet clothes that the format was wrong. There was a receptionist who did not look up. There was a box under a previous HR manager's desk, labeled incomplete. These are the systems that move silently, that cost nothing to maintain and everything to overcome, not because they are hard to understand, but because they are easy not to notice when you are dry, when you are inside, when you parked your car at the gate. You cannot seal a notebook. You can reject the format it comes in. You can separate it from the pile. But the information inside it, the 9 years, the 312,000 CDs, the 2 columns in a company's public accounts that didn't reconcile the way they should, that does not disappear when you put it in a box under a desk. It waits. The people who think they are managing a process are often, without knowing it, just briefly delaying something. And the morning Adaora and Wosu walked 4.5 kilometers in the Accra rain, pressing a notebook page against her chest to keep it dry, was not a morning she was fighting for her dignity. She had not surrendered it. She was simply waiting for the rain to stop and the shutters to open and the numbers to be typed correctly on the first try. She already knew what she was worth. She was just waiting for someone else to do the arithmetic. If you have ever done the arithmetic and known the answer and been told the format was wrong, leave that in the comments. I want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about hidden strength, quiet power, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.